Cool. All right, let's jump in. We've got a great guest here today. We've got Tal Raviv from Riverside, which is super meta because we're actually in Riverside right now recording this. So we'll definitely get into that. But Tal, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast with us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is a very meta experience for me.
Well, I'm excited to get into it. And before we do, there's a lot of cool stuff you guys are doing with product, maybe, and a lot of cool stuff with product and product management, product work in general we can talk about. I'm excited to dive into your experience, tips, and all that. Maybe just give us the kind of quick background, where you're from, how you got your start working in product in the first place.
I started out actually studying chemical engineering, and that's like the chemical engineering, like oil drilling, oil refineries, pharmaceutical processes, mass production. Interned in that. I was really excited about that field. And in college, I happened to have this idea. This is back in 2007, 8, 9. Had this idea for a really bad idea for a startup. And I, long story short, was in software, worked with a few friends to build it, learned over the years to code, build it myself, build feature iterations myself, and became addicted to the contrast between the instant gratification of software versus $500 million chemical plants. And then, so it became a SaaS company, and I did that for a few more years. And then when I decided to get a real job, I learned that the parts that I really enjoyed of the startup was not necessarily the craftsmanship of writing code, but doing support and marketing at the same time as technical and design, and but never really being very talented at any one of those things. And it turns out in the real world, that's called product manager. If you kind of like the broad spectrum of all those things and working with those people, but you don't have any particular strength that qualifies you for those jobs. So that's what the next job that I had, and pretty much the only job I've ever had since. Then I worked at Wix, and here in Tel Aviv. I went back to San Francisco and worked at Patreon for a few years, and then AppsFlyer, and now I am at Riverside.
Nice. I think I remember the Patreon office in Soma because I was on Harrison and what was it, 4th and Harrison? I think a block or two away. I remember the Patreon office there. So maybe we might have crossed paths on Mission Street at some point. But very, very, very cool. So tell me about. Let's get into Riverside. It's one of, and I'm not just saying this, it's one of the best and more exciting products I've used, especially in work, over the past year. We've been on Riverside since day one with our podcast, and probably, maybe close to 100 episodes, at least 50 or 75 at this point, that we've done in Riverside, and it's been a really excellent product. It's allowed us to record high quality audio and video and use that for our whole kind of media strategy here on the marketing side at Launch Notes. So it's a really cool product. I'm really impressed by it. I think this is the second company I've used it at, but I'd love for you to maybe tell me in your own words how did you find this product? What excited you about working on Riverside? And we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. I'll give the medium version of the story. The thing that really grabbed me and really got my attention about Riverside here in Tel Aviv is when it dawned on me that the most pivotal moments for me with software tools or any kind of technology tools in my life, where they were iMovie, they were Medium and Notion type tools for writing, they were Lego Mindstorms for coding and hardware robotics as a kid. There were Glitch for coding later in life, and building web apps for fun, all the way to DJ apps that I had a roommate who was a really professional DJ and had tons and very expensive equipment, and then I could do 80% of that a few years later with an app and feel really engrossed in creation. And what those all had in common was the ability to create without barriers to entry, whether that barrier is money or investment of time or course or credentials, and let me get right to the fun part of expressing myself and forget about the tool for the most part. And I realized that that's what Riverside is building, or was, is building for the world of conversational content. And that tool doesn't exist. But to make, and you know this very well, like to do what you are doing is not accessible to everybody. It takes a lot of thought, preparation, research, whether it's Reddit groups, communities on Facebook, people sharing tips with each other. And, we find a lot of inspiration in what Canva has done for Photoshop, where you don't have to go on Reddit and consult with people in order to use Canva. You don't have to Google and read a lot of these white papers or blog posts and best practices to use Medium, right, and so on. So that's what we're chipping away at. That's our vision for conversational content, which when I first heard conversational content, I was like, that's a really small niche of content. Like there's so much more. And then you realize like that's actually like the vast majority, like the biggest plurality of content on the internet. And also the kind of content I think that is most intimate, least clickbait, most bridging. I think the kind we need more of. So I really, really identify with what Riverside is doing. Really
Very
personal.
cool.
Like I want this tool to exist in the world.
That's so cool. There's so many cool directions you could go with that. Totally agree with you. And it's funny. I actually wrote out, I'll send it to you after our call. Like I'm running content and content strategy here at Launch Notes, and we're still growing, sort of Series A B2B SaaS startup, but the podcast and these recorded conversations and this kind of output we're creating right now is the sort of hub of the whole strategy. And I think it's a really smart way to build a content strategy in 2023. And I've been through everything with, blogs and SEO and social, and I've kind of been around enough now to see all these different kind of waves come and go. But this does feel like a very, it's almost sort of like the purest distillation of what like a really great content strategy can be. And I think kind of we've really intentionally put these recorded conversations at the center of our entire strategy and all our thinking for our marketing department, because it's such a potent output that then you can go do so much more with. And it's been really kind of incredible and uplifting for us. So totally agree with you. And as a sidebar, I need to make a list of products that get referenced the most in this podcast, because every third episode, someone mentions Canva. Incredible product, definitely. But I love the sentiment, it's empowering, and there's these iconic products, and you can even go back to like everything like Apple Computer did, like with iPhones and, Mac 2 and all that, where it's like empowering larger parts of the market, like taking, tools that were, had barriers of entry, whether it was cost, expertise, access, and sort of expanding that to everybody. It's a really kind of powerful space to be in. It's got to be super exciting to work on.
Definitely. And Canva is both in terms of what it did for its space, but also like my personal experience with Canva was just, I remember I got lucky. I found out about it like a month before other people at Patreon found out about it at the time. And I had a month where people, including really talented designers, were giving me all these compliments. Like, I didn't know you had a design background. Like, literally, that's what they were telling me. I got to enjoy that for about 30 days until they.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. And it's I think if you're in the tech bubble, like Canva's one thing, and I've sort of gone back and forth. Now I'm out of San Francisco. I'm back in just kind of a small town in Michigan, working remote, and I have a lot of friends who are, non-technical, not professional designers, who are running like brick and mortar small businesses and SMBs. And all of them are using Canva. It's just like an amazing tool for, creating social media content, all this. This is not a Canva podcast, by the way. I'm going to have to ask them for sponsorship money if we go on too much longer with this. But yeah, the tool category is super interesting. Um, so let's maybe dive into some more of your, because our audience is largely, product folks, product managers. I know you gave me some notes before the call, which is super helpful. I'm interested in this one. I'd like you to expand on this note you left, because I'm really interested in, what's behind this. You mentioned something about the pendulum swinging between
Mm.
different forms of dogma, realizing it's a mess, and nobody actually knows. What do you mean by that?
Yes. um, so I think over the course of different places that I've worked over the years, I I always would find myself coming out of each experience with this very clear dogma about how product works. Like, this is how you do product, and if you don't, your time is limited. Like, there's no way this can last. Um, and and then wait a few years and go through another school of thought and another company, and then somehow I have this totally other dogma, um,
Mm-hmm.
of like, you have to be, it has to be an outcome, and you have to have a clear KPI, and if you don't have that, like, you're just going to be shipping things for no reason, and everything's going to blow up. Um, and and then I went through that phase, and then I arrived back in Israel, and I worked at a company where I was aghast. I was like, "What? There, nothing has a KPI. There's not outcomes. The roadmap is all features. This is Marty Kagan said not to do this." Um, and um, and over time, that schooled me again, to be like, "Wait, okay, that is working too. There's something that's working about this. This can't be a fluke for so long. The company's been around for 13 years, um,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have a clear strategy doc, and they're not, there's no hierarchy of OKRs, um, but they reach 1,500 people, and they're still making good decisions, and adapting quickly to the market, and really basing things off of customer input. So um, it taught me um, to really understand that there's no one right way. That it matters more the customer that you're serving, the market that you're in, the I guess the nature of the industry, and of course there's things that don't change, like somebody in the company somewhere, hopefully the product person, is very close to the customer on any channel that you can possibly have, whether it's listening to sales calls, talking to them directly, user research, reading support tickets, and on and on, right? Like, those things have to happen at some point. You can't be in a vacuum and making stuff up inside the building. But past that, whether it comes to development, like waterfall or no waterfall, and do agile and do
Mm-hmm.
scrum or don't do scrum, or use 1 week sprints, 2 week sprints, or 4 week sprints, um, there's no right answer, and the only wrong answer is dogma. I think that's like my me growing up moment.
Yeah. That's I love that. And it's like I don't know if this is like advice about art or fashion or what, but there's this idea of like, hey, like advanced people know the rules so they can break them. And I get the sense that or so they can bend them. And it's like, I like that you're not like recommending don't know the dogma, or don't practice the, whether it's agile or scrum or shape up or whatever you're doing, like know the text, but also know how to sort of like think outside of it. I think that's super smart. And it's interesting, like we've had, like I said, 50 plus product folks on this show in the past year, and we've had associate PMs who are a couple years out of college, all the way up to CEOs, co-founders. Just last week had a VP of product at Stripe, so a good range of experience there. And I have noticed the more advanced folks, the less you hear about the dogma and this, just sort of like the vocabulary of agile or this or that, or Marty Kagan says do this, but continuous and discovery says do that. Like, you get a lot of that with sort of like early mid-career folks. And then my theory is you do need to kind of grow out of that or know that, but be able to communicate beyond it to really excel. And you also grow into a spot where like you're kind of communicating and storytelling not just to other practitioners of the thing. Like you're talking to customers, salespeople, investors, the press, whomever. Like they don't really care about your vocab words around, Scrum Master or whatever. Like they need like a human kind of story and connection and all that. So there's definitely a sort of growing into that I've noticed as a pattern.
Yeah, I had a colleague in one company who he was an engineering manager, and we were sitting over coffee one day, and he said, "Yeah, the previous company I was at, they did everything right. They had all the right processes. Everything was so well managed, and product wise, and engineering wise, and Jira wise, and whatever else you could possibly do all the best practices. And they failed to raise their Series D, or now they don't exist. So like they did that, and you can have a company doing everything cowboy style and no process, and you just have to be really." I think it comes down to
Yeah.
really good instincts for your market and your customer, and what that market and customer need.
100%. Yeah, I worked at so I spent 5 years at Atlassian before jumping back into the startup world, and they really with Jira kind of hitched their wagon to Agile in a big way, and kind of rode that wave, and I saw a good spectrum of kind of folks' relationships with the Agile methodology, and there's definitely some of it's just like kind of feels like religious fervor, like some of the some of the like attachment to the dogma with that. And then I do notice with a lot of these, whether it's Agile or lean or something else, or it's it, quickly people kind of like lose the forest through the trees, and they get hung up on the details, and they get hung up on they miss some of the bigger points, and they get kind of lost in the religious text of it all, and debating the minutia of the text rather than adhering to the overall principles. Like you can practice Agile without calling it Agile, or you can take a couple of those ideas and apply them without being fervent about it. So it's super interesting topic.
Yeah, I think
I
if I could summarize product in 3 words, it'd be good people talking. Just good people
Yeah,
that actually talk, and the rest works out.
that's been another amazing realization I found, and I think another pattern, like more advanced sort of like established folks like kind of come back to that. They use data and sort of like quantitative data as a backdrop and as a tool, obviously, but it's not, more junior folks get kind of lost in like, if I can't answer this with a SQL query or a dashboard, like I've got nothing. And then I'll talk to someone who's like, a VP at Stripe, and they're like, well, I talked to this person and he pointed me that direction. And it's like, it's a mix, and it's having that conviction, right? By often just talking to people, which is incredibly insightful. So I want to go a little, I don't typically do this, but I want to go a little choose your own adventure with this next question, because I'll ask it in the little behind the scenes here. I'll ask guests about some conventional wisdom, to think about some conventional wisdom that they would question or push back on. Sometimes people have one or two. You gave me like a laundry list of like 6 things here, which I love. And I feel like I can tell you're passionate about each of these. So maybe, I don't know if you got the doc pulled up, but maybe I'm going to let you pick one of these topics, and we'll chew on this, because I want to know which one of these you want to talk about.
I'll go with the first one, because that's clearly the first one that chronologically came to my mind.
Perfect.
And it is the one I feel most passionate about.
Okay.
And it's basically that product isn't a role, product is a team. So
okay.
I think this is the kind of thing that as people mature over their careers, as companies mature, that this is a realization everybody has, that people will say you'll hear sentences like that. Well, that's product's job, or product didn't take this into account. And the implication is that there's this role, this product, and they have all the answers, and they're like the hub of the wheel, they're spokes, and they're like the nerve center of this thing and the memory center, and they're activating everybody else. And some people operate that way, and there's some situations that make sense to operate that way. I think for innovative products with high uncertainty, with lots of risks and lots of creativity, the best way to operate is more of a mess. And that means that your QA person, if you have one, your engineers on this project, your designers, your analyst, and product person are all in it together to answer all these question marks that come up about how we're going to solve this problem. Now, product has a distinct role. If they do anything, it's to identify the problem, identify why we're solving this problem. How does this connect to the strategy? How does this, right? Like, what's the story behind this? Who is it for? And what is the problem not? What are we not doing? And also, what is the appetite? How much are we willing to invest in this? How much time do we have to invest in this? How many people we have to invest in this? So that is what all those people crave, so that they can have the constraints to be creative and think creatively. And from there, the best outcomes I've ever had as a team at any company have, funny enough, never been my idea. Like in terms of things that literally pushed metrics and changed the business or changed the experience or whatever the goal was, across the board, almost invariably, they have not been my idea as a product person. And they've come from giving context to really talented people and doing my homework intensively and coming with a very clear narrative and letting these really smart people bounce off of each other, bounce off of me, and come up with things that I would never alone come up with, that only the team could have come up with. And I know that maybe sounds like utopian. It really works. You get good people in the room and you give them freedom, but you give them enough constraints. Magic happens. And when I say product isn't a role, it's a team. It's also day to day, as we're developing, as we're coding, as we're getting it close to the finish line. Operate as much tactically in a Slack channel, open Slack channel. People, the organizations tend to really want to just DM the PM directly, DM the product managers on Slack, and just everyone wants to ask the product manager directly questions. And it's very tempting to answer those direct messages and be the hub to the spokes. And it's about creating a culture where there's just a channel. We're all in it. Like by the time I get around to it, I get out of meetings and can answer you, right? If you put it in the channel, and this happens all the time, 7 other people have not just answered it, they've had a whole discussion and come up with a few recommendations. Usually the answer's obvious. I might show up at the end and be able to make a decision and unblock people. But operating this way is faster, better outcomes, and obviously the responsibility and the ownership is always on the PM at the end of the day. But it's a role. It's a team, not a role.
I love the Slack channel as a sort of proxy for your point there. It makes total sense, because it's like, I think of every think of any major launch you've worked on, and just imagine or spy in on that Slack channel the day, the week, 2 weeks out from the launch. You're going to see really rich conversation in there with, you're going to have PMs, marketing, support, sales, engineering, design. There's going to be a real intermingling of conversation, and a lot of it kind of aligns to folks' roles, but a lot of it is you could be a fly on the wall and not necessarily be able to pinpoint right away, who's the PM versus the designer versus the salesperson, because it's one kind of collective unit at that point. So I love that, I love that analogy and that point. All right. So like I said, you've got you did have a laundry list of of other strong opinions here. Anything else you listed here that you want to jump into? What else can we chew on here?
Some of that we implicitly covered earlier. Something related to what we just talked about. I wrote here PRDs and specs.
I was literally just going to suggest that you bring that one up. So yeah. So I want to actually
connect this. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just want to read what you wrote. You wrote, PRDs specs are not something you sit and write. It's you capturing the result of a conversation. I love that actually, but I'll let you kind of kick it off.
It's funny because recently I have a really good friend who's very deep, very big expert on AI, and we're just chatting, and he's like, I mean, you use GPT, you know, Chat GPT for
For
work,
sure.
and I was like, actually, um, I'm still looking for a way to work it in. And he's like, I'm gonna, fly over there and hit you. Like, of course you should be using it. How are you not using it? I'm like, I'll look for. He's like, it can write PRDs and it can do this and it can write tickets and you probably read lots of reports and it can summarize things for you. And I was like, well, I don't really write a lot of long documents or spend a whole lot of time, writing PRDs. Or I know people think this is what product people do, or it's what they imagine my day to day is like. And my day to day is way more lots of conversations. I'm the scribe, I'm the secretary writing down the results of that conversation and saving it and documenting it. And when it comes to outputting, I don't spend a lot of my time, if any of my time, sitting and writing long PRDs or Jira tickets. It's usually the conversation. I'm having tons of conversations throughout my day with engineers, with designers, with legal, with sales, customer success, whatever it is. And I'm recording and scribing and being the secretary to those conversations and the one responsible for capturing the conclusions and what we decide. But that's second nature. That's the easy part compared to those conversations and those tough topics. And I don't. It's funny when I think of my role. I know a lot of people see product from the side as the person who wrote this really long document, went into their cave, thought of everything, came out and came down from the mountain, and
Mm-hmm.
presented it to everybody, and either it's good or it sucks, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's not how life works, and I think the more I see my job as capturing and documenting conversations that I have, and judgment that's made as a team, and the less I see it as, the person who wrote a really great long epic, then the easier my job becomes.
I I love this point. I love this topic. I think it applies in a lot of ways. And my my kind of first career before getting into startups and marketing and everything was I was a newspaper reporter. I wrote for daily newspapers for a lot of years, and that's the kind of hey, professional writer, like you're probably sitting like typing away. I would often say like the actual typing is 5% of my job, maybe 10% if I'm really got a meaty thing going. But even then, it's like the typing is not the job. The typing is just like the little delivery mechanism at the end of the day. 90+% of my time is spent out in the community, talking to people, interviewing people, going to the zoning board meeting, figuring out what's going on, trying to find the document that's got the information that's got this, like figuring out where the story is, double checking it with sources, developing sources, like all that stuff. And then the output is just, the writing is the output of all that work. But the real work is everything that comes before it. I love the connection you made there. So in that world of like newspaper reporting and writing, there's a saying I always used and still use is, every writing problem is a reporting problem. And for me, that's still true. And
I
it's
love
like,
that.
if I got back to the office and went to type my story, if the story wasn't strong enough, it wasn't a writing problem. It wasn't that I didn't have the right adjectives or flow of words or something. It was I needed to go back, get more information, figure out something tricky, double check, like I need to go out and do more reporting, not more writing. Right. And I see that all the time where people, like, great example with PRDs, or it could be, a project brief or anything. You don't have to be working in product for this to apply. People kind of sit down at a blank page and are like, okay, here we go. And it's like, no, like you've either got the research or the lived experience or something to draw from. And if you're struggling at the page, the problem is, earlier on in the research and gathering and, analysis phase. So I love this point. And I've had a similar kind of, love hate relationship with GPT and AI tools lately, where it's like, yeah, like they can do like the kind of easy part for me. For some people, the writing is the hard part. Like I totally get that, and it's helpful. But what I really need is help with like creating the inputs, right? Like that to me is the real work, and I love applying that to product work because it makes total sense.
That's really cool to hear that that is um, that's like cross field. That's like a thing. That, yeah. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, hearing you say it's 5% of journalism, the typing is 5% of journalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really resonates.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's like, and I see this with great product workers, where in and product managers, where it's like I look at what they're doing most of their day, and it's having conversations, working with engineers, working with designers, talking to customers, talking to customers, talking to customers, talking to sales, sitting in on sales calls. They're not like hobbited away in their cave, like typing, like these uh, gifted from heaven product specs. Like the work that goes into it is, once you do that work, then the writing in a lot of ways is the easy part. Uh, love that point. I'm so glad we got into that. I want to jump into. Um, I like to ask, and you listed a few here in our little prep doc, which I appreciate. I like to ask product people about products they're into lately. This could be work, personal, whatever. What's a product or some products that you are kind of playing with or think are cool?
Yeah. Um, I'll confess to something, which is I'm not an early adopter of technology,
Mm-hmm.
and I found that there's a term for this effect that I'm really into. It's called the Lindy effect. I think it's called the Lindy effect. I read about it in a book called Anti-Fragile. I think a lot of people listen to
Oh,
this
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
and it's this principle that something that's been around for a very long time is more likely to be around for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you walk into a bookshop, look at all the bestsellers, or go on Product Hunt and look at all the new things that have been uploaded or posted, some of those things are going to be around for a very long time.
Mm.
But things that were launched yesterday or published yesterday and so on, there's going to be a much higher noise to signal ratio.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at things that have been around for a very, very long time, some of those will fail tomorrow. Some of those are going to blow up tomorrow. Some of them will. But there's a much higher signal to noise ratio. And I'm saying this because I tend to really late adopt products for this reason. I know I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud on a podcast as a product person, but I just find that's what I end up doing, or at least not being the first to jump on things when they're first launched in the first wave. I kind of let other people, filter out the noise, and that's what I'm saying all this because my favorite product is an app on my phone called OneWriter, which is basically what would be on your Mac, text edit, or what would be on your Windows computer, Notepad.
Okay.
The one cool thing about it is that it synchronizes with Dropbox. So I have a folder with a bunch of text files, and I have the app on my phone. You might ask me, why aren't you using iOS Notes? And I'll say this is actually what I really love about OneWriter. It is just the simplest tool in the world. There's no options. It's just text files, and it just syncs, and they're really lightweight, and it works offline. And there's no frills. There's like Notion. I love Notion. I use it for a ton of things in my life, personal and business. Yeah. But it's so fancy and there's so many things that it loses speed, and it loses a lot of really basic things that you get when you stick to text edit or when you stick to OneWriter or Notes on your phone.
I 100% feel that. Yeah, no, I 100% feel that. That's so interesting. I mean, I've played with, again, love Notion, use it for work all the time. There's all sorts of, and obviously every couple of years there's a new, at least one, if not a half dozen, note-taking, writing, to-do list apps that people are excited about. And it is that the more kind of features and functionality and stuff that comes in, the more I've noticed these products introduce that latency from the latency between like I realize I want something to write something down and how long it takes me to actually like start recording that. I mean, milliseconds can feel like, weeks. Like it's literally every millisecond counts. And there's so many times with, I won't name names on certain products, but it's like, open the app. Okay, here we go. It's loading. It's opening. It's like, okay, well, I can't just type it in this doc. Now I have to go find the document to bring it in. Okay, actually now I'm in read mode. I need to click into edit mode. Now I need to scroll to where I want to type. Now I need to click there, and now I need to get my cursor to pop up. And it's like, it sounds trivial, but it's like that is greatly enough headache and latency to make me go, I'll write it down later. No, I won't mess with it. So like anything, and I've played with, I've sort of settled, I'll have to try this because I've sort of settled on notes as like, it's kind of the fastest. If my internet connection, is non-existent, it'll still open up. That's another big thing for me with a lot of these apps where it's like, hey, like I've got an idea to write down, but I'm like in an elevator. So I have to wait. Like that just sucks. So I'll have to try this out because that is, that's a big kind of friction point that I think gets missed, and there's all the other features won't save it. It's that little bit of latency and friction can throw you off. What was that called?
Yeah.
Writer, one writer.
Writer. It's like the number
Okay.
one, the digit
Yeah.
one, and the word writer. It's interesting because when you said every millisecond you add, like we know all those famous war stories of Google and the milliseconds and website loading and all that.
Yeah.
On Amazon. But it's even in a work environment, when talking about e-commerce or ads, it's about every millisecond is like exponentially raises the barrier in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So exactly.
Yeah.
I'll just do it later. And every fewer millisecond is a lower, like exponentially lower, and you forget about the tool, and you're just more likely to write it down and record it and find it later and do something about it.
Yeah. It's a great principle and a good lesson for product folks. I like the early adopter point. I mean, I think it's easy to only look at the upsides. People talk about being an early adopter and they only look at the upsides of it. And in a lot of ways, like maybe with software and things like free plans and freemium and open source, it's like you can kind of like get your hands on stuff for without making a big like cash investment at least. But even so, there's still the investment of your time, right? Like, and there's still the investment, the opportunity cost of like what else you could be doing. And then certainly on the consumer side, it's just like, there's people who paid $10,000 for a 3D TV 10 years ago. That's, useless now. So there's plenty of downside to being, everyone talks about the first person who, got started using the iPhone, but they don't talk about the guy who wasted money on a Microsoft phone.
I'm the kid who bought a Game Gear.
Nice. Yeah. See, perfect. And then ever since you were like, I'm never getting burned again. Definitely. Well, Tal, this has been super fun. I mean, I could talk about this kind of stuff all day. I know it's getting late in your part of the world, so appreciate you staying up to have this chat. If folks want to, obviously your product is riverside.fm. I can't recommend it enough if you're doing a podcast or a project like this. If folks want to get in touch with you, say hi, where can they find you?
Twitter. I'm most active on LinkedIn, and of course, Medium is where I post a lot of.
For sure. Well,
Getting in touch. LinkedIn's the best site.
Awesome. Well, we'll drop those links in the show notes so folks can find them. Otherwise, thanks so much for being here. We'll have to have you back for a round two because I know there's more that we can get into, but appreciate you having the chat today. Thanks, Tal.
Thank you. My pleasure.